Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Nahan, Anissa, Erica McKinn-Hansen. Hello, my name is Erica McKinn-Hansen. I am the Program Director of the Little River Institute at Montana State University Northern here. And the Little River Institute is a program we now have that's funded by the Department of Education, the Native American Survey of Non-Tribal Institutions program. And as part of that, we are creating a culturally responsive learning and campus environment. And in doing that, we have an Indigenous Education Lecture Series, and we have our honored guest today, who is the first speaker in this lecture series, and I'm glad that you all can join us. Dr. Donald Pepion is a college professor who teaches Native American Studies courses in the Anthropology department at New Mexico State University. He's an enrolled member of the Blackfeet Indian Nation, where he's also an elder. He has an extensive background in education, health, and tribal government, including an appointment as the president of Blackfeet Community College. His current research includes a participatory action research study on Native American student cultural sources of strength at New Mexico State University. He received his doctor and master degrees from Montana State University in adult, community, and higher education, while his bachelor degree is in business management and sociology from New Mexico State University. Please join me, Montana State University Northern and the Little River Institute, in welcoming Dr. Donald Pepion.
Okay. Sandy Staffy. I'll tell you what that means, but okay. Dan, di sto picani, Danico, Zimma. I am Blackfeet. I said hello. I am Blackfeet. My name is Stabda Zimma. That name was given to me in 1985 after I tried acknowledging the elders and that the traditional people as being the first Blackfeet president of our tribal college. So I went through the whole ceremony, transferred the rank to where the ward wanted. So and I was also given that name. And in our tribe, your name can change throughout your lifetime as you do different things. So that is that. You got my American name, Pepion. So I'm really pleased to be here with you. And first of all, what us Indigenous people are doing these days is acknowledging the Indigenous people, the people that were here before 1492, aren't even Indigenous. We're all Indigenous, but I use that, qualify that. The homelands of our people and the Picani, as we call ourselves, traveled here also. So to acknowledge the Gros-Ventres, the Crees, the Assiniboines, the other tribes, and the non-federally recognized Cree groups and Métis that were here and that. So we want to acknowledge them. I want to thank Erica for inviting me to come here and visit with you. Yes, I'm down at New Mexico State University, but I worked at a tribal college and lived and worked on a reservation for 25 years, and went down to New Mexico and thought I would be there 5 years, and we're still there. Well, why? My wife is from down there, and I can't get her to go back up to this cold country. That's part of it. And you know, being a rancher and a cowboy and all those old broken bones, that's why I got this chair. It's nice to be in that warm climate in the winter time. So I want to thank Erica. I think it's a wonderful idea and program that I learned that she's heading up, and I want to thank the college. And I'm impressed with what went on today. I had the opportunity to visit with the faculty, and some of them are here. the opportunity to visit with some of the people in the support services. And coming here, I wasn't quite sure what we were going to, the kind of environment we had to deal with, but I was impressed with what you have here, because we're going to talk about sources of strength. And some of the sources of strength is you have some people that care, some faculty, and support service people. And they're willing to listen, and that's what's important, because I talk about some pretty challenging things sometimes. We're going to talk a little bit about some of that tonight, to learn that there's other ways of knowing, there's other ways of creating truth, and sometimes we challenge the scientific method, and that's what you find out, that there are other cultural ways. So when I was invited, somehow Erica had identified that I worked with some things on value, conflict, this indigenous ways of knowing, decolonizing. I teach Native American Studies in the Anthropology department at New Mexico State University. We have an undergraduate minor in Native Studies and a graduate minor, and actually have two of the graduate courses that we call decolonizing, and another one, indigenous ways of knowing. But we talk about several things, but this is about, how do we in the institution work with indigenous people? How do we work with Native Americans, with Indian students? And of course in higher education, we talk about the big R, retention. A measure of success in higher education from an institutional point of view is your retention rate. And that's measured by, especially within the first year. If a student survives the first year, the chances are greater that they will complete college. And they look at graduation rate. So the graduation and retention rates, as we know, with Native American students has been less than overall population. And we talk about those kinds of things. And retention is pretty challenging, but we'll tell you something more about that as we go. So I thought tonight we would share this study with you because it was done using this participatory model. And in decolonizing, that's one of the things that we do, is help students to learn about how to do this kind of qualitative research. And it can be quantitative too, but it's challenging because, but let me put it this way first, before I tell you, well, because if you look at the fact that we as indigenous Indian people have been studied to death, all kinds of studies. Mike Deloria, our Native American scholar, who's written so many books, talks about that, especially with the anthropologists. And I'm an anthropologist, so what are you doing there? But they come on the reservation, they want to do a study, they come armed with their cameras and their notebooks and their khakis on, and observe and write things down and ask questions, and then they leave and they write something in some obscure journal somewhere, and the tribal people don't get anything out of it, and what they write is probably all wrong, and that kind of thing. So a lot of indigenous people, and some of the same stuff is in the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights, that Indians need to be involved in the research. So the participatory method is that the people we're working with participate in the study at all levels. From the beginning of identifying the problem, the situation we're going to work on, what is the method and procedures we're going to use, and actually doing the research itself, and participating, writing up the results, and if some of the results are disparaging or pour reflection on people, we can throw it out at all levels. So it challenges what we've been taught about research, and sometimes indigenous ways of knowing challenges what we call scientific method. So that's a little bit about that. So there's a lot of territory to cover. This was a big study, so let's get on with it. And again, thank you for having me here to share this with you, and hopefully we will help you learn some things. I'll be standing up, but I'll sit down occasionally, and that's okay. So here, myself, let's see, is there a pointer on here? So that's when I was eating quite well. So that's myself and Dr. Lisa Grayshield, who is a Washoe Native American. He taught this course, teaching students how to do participatory, how to do qualitative research, actually, and use this theory and method for the Native students. And we had diversity. There's Hispanic and Anglo, and this is the only undergraduate who's Pueblo, Candace Kwong. She got her degree in anthropology, but then she realized when she went home, I want to live my passion. So she's doing art. So I think that's great. So what we, why did we do this study? The need to decolonize academic research theory, method, collaboration, we talked about that. But the other thing is a strength-based approach rather than a deficit model. And that's the big thing, is that natives realize this, and there's also a thing we talked about, a guy named Chip Anderson, who is renowned in studying this thing called retention, that after all the years of being the expert, he finally realized, hey, we're working on the wrong side of this thing. So he learned from another person who was looking at strengths, and so our native people in the literature are doing that now, the deficit model. There's always something wrong with us, It's your own bad fault because you can't make it in society or college or whatever. So that's what we're looking at. Decolonizing has a lot to do with the way we have to look at, we'll look at some of these things, effects of oppression, participatory resiliency is the same thing as strength. One of the biggest strengths for Native Americans in this country is it's an amazing story. You know, the people that came here have tried to assimilate and acculturate us, Christianize and civilize, and when we've been studied by the anthropologists, because we're a dying people. But the point is we're not. We're some of the most resilient people on this earth. In the face of all of that, we're still here. Our population is growing. We still have our language. We still have our ways. We still have our ceremonies. So that's what we want to look at. Oppression, decolonization come in there because we've been dehumanized. Paulo Freire, on Pedagogy of the Oppressed, when he worked with the poor people in Brazil, identified that. And that's where we learn in these classes like decolonizing is like terminology, like savage, like primitive, like uncivilized. That's put into all of our heads that these people are less than. And that's why we need to learn about these things. There's a thing called structural racism. That it's dehumanizing, it's racist, but we don't think of it that way because we've gotten structural, we've gotten so used to it. It kind of makes it okay because we see it all the time. And so that's one of the things too. And indigenous ways of knowing that there are other ways of creating truth. We're going to spend a lot of time on that because I want to share the study with you, but is that there's something called epistemology, the way people create knowledge, or something called ontology, is that way of being, that way of knowing. Just to tell you quickly, as I mentioned today, one of the ways is that, well, let me put it this way. Everything, we're all related, as far as indigenous people, to all things. And that humankind is not above all things. We're a part of everything. Everything is moving, everything is animate, everything has a spirit. And it's interesting how science kind of caught up to us. We finally realized, oh, a rock has a spirit? Yeah. Oh, they found out there's atoms, there's electrons, now there's nanoparticles, and there's things that are moving in there. And it's alive. Everything is animate. It's alive. Oh, there's energy in everything. Now we know that. And we're all related. We're all, look at the science chart. We're all composed of the same elements. So we are all related. So actually, what we call the overall dominant society, I don't like to use that too much, is they're catching on that hey. So through our stories, a guy named Grayboy, who's written an article called Critical Race Theory, is that what he has stated as a scholar is that stories are our theory. Stories are our theory. And so the genesis, the origin stories, the so-called fables, involve knowledge, and some of that is in the ceremonies. One of my findings in my research when I heard the elders is ceremonies are a reenactment of the genesis, of the origin story. Because in the ceremony, you get the story, you get the dance, you get the song, you get the movement, and there's very strict ways that are passed on for eons, huh? And so there's that. The other thing is that we're observers. Excuse me. So we indigenous people have observed the world for eons. So through that knowledge, we already had this kind of knowledge. It's empirical. It's just not really experiment. I'm spending a little more time on that, but I don't need to do that. But I really want to help you to understand that. Sometimes the doorway is critical theory, especially with the graduate students, because that helps us to take critical thinking a little bit further and to question things more and look at it and find out that where knowledge comes from, and find out that here's the example I use for some. A scientist and a traditional maybe medicine person, the scientist says, well, yeah, you observe, you know a lot of things, but you have this thing called spirituality, and that's not real. That doesn't exist. The traditional person says, oh, okay. In your knowledge, you have this thing called quantitative knowledge, but that's also based on some abstract concepts, and those aren't real either. You got to think about that, folks. Okay, let's move on. Spent too much time on it. So what we done is we trained some students to do this kind of research. We recruited 21 students to participate in the study. We taught them how to do focus groups, a research question is, are there cultural factors that reinforce persistence with Native American? So we wanted to look at what are their strengths. And the procedures, we taught the students how to do focus groups. There were 4 groups, 2 student researchers with each group. They recorded the data as it was an open-ended. We would code the data for similarities, for reoccurring incidences, using that methodology. Recorded with the recorder, and basically coded the data that way, and we would recycle each time. We met, each group met, each of the 4 groups met 4 times. Then we bring that data from each group together with us as researchers, we would code it, we would name it, classify it, categorize it, bring it back to the group, here's what you said. They would then take it again and say, well, yeah, that's what we said, but here's some more of that, here's what I meant, and we add to it. So in the participatory model, you keep recycling the data until you reach a point that you start, that's the essence. This is what it is. So that's the methodology. So we talked about moving by clusters, essences, data analysis. Okay, so here's the findings. We'll get into it now. This is really what we want to look at, right? Here's the results. When we ask the student, what are your sources of strength, and we categorize them, and again, remember, this is affirmed by those people. This is what the students told us. So family is the most important. Tribe and community support. Culture is important. Social transition, and well, how is transition a source of strength? But actually, what that can be cultural too, but we called it that because students can use their cultural strengths to stay in college. And we're going to talk a little more about some of that. Support services are a source of strength, especially the Native American programs. Socioeconomic factors come into it, how your families help you, and how tribes and families help each other. Goals and motivation, we brought that in too. We'll talk about more in detail. Preparation is an issue. Role models. So looking at family, what they said is that the strong extended family and elders are important for their guidance. Family pride, just to be able to go to college, is important. So they got reinforcement from their families. And some of their families attended college and became education is an important thing. But one thing they wanted, like all humans, we all want to improve our quality of life, and maybe this is one way we can do that. But the financial was a mixed message, that there was financial support and also staying home. And this is where the socioeconomic factors come in. I can go to college, I can learn, I can get a job, I can help improve our situation. But geez, my family's having a tough time. Maybe I just better go to work and contribute to our family and that. So first generation, those are students whose family members haven't been to college, is that they become the role model for their family. And so they have pride, but there's also that fear of failure. Am I going to make it? So it's even more difficult with that. Tribal community support. Encouraged by community and tribal people, really important source of strength, and that goes in each of them. So elders, go to college, help our people when you come back. And kinship and ceremony. So culture is related to the traditions that most tribes have. In a lot of our Plains Indians, we have society. There's our social cultural groups that we joined when we were young, and we obtain knowledge out there. We have clan systems. Those are important to who we are as a people, the identity thing. And there's a strong sense of cohesion, connection to home, including that cultural support. Going home for ceremonies and that. We'll look at that. Elders support higher education, but they want students to return home. And we'll talk about that. Going back, wanting to improve the situation economically, but also wanting to go home to where there's not many jobs. So how do we do that? Yeah, so that's what it's right there. So it's difficult. And they did say that. The reservation doesn't change. So I want to go, but I have this goal to do that. But I realize it's going to be a challenge. significance of culture. And this is one of the most important things. Spirituality is important in their lives. And here's an interesting one, that we have to put down what they came up with, is that New Mexico State is 60% Hispanic. And for some of the students, what helped them was to know that there's other groups here. There's Asians, there's Hispanics, there's others that are here. And so that really makes it possible for me as a native coming from a different place to make it here. Ceremony, important aspect of spirituality. And ceremony and rituals. And this is probably one of the most significant findings here, and we're going to talk about under transition some other kind of things. Well, one of the things that they talk about is that you need accommodation for ceremonies. Professors, people working in institutions just don't understand. In fact, most Navy students know this. In fact, especially with down there, the Pueblos are very conservative. They don't talk, not to talk about their culture, especially their ceremonies. Huh? So many times, because they know if I go to the professor, well, where are you going? What are you going to do? Why are you going to be gone? We taught not to talk about it. So I'm not even going to go tell them. Ask that person for an excuse or even whoever it is, support programs, because they just won't understand. And they're going to interrogate me and want to know. Huh? And so they just leave. And sometimes ceremonies, as we know, may last for days. And it may be ritual things. It may be a family death that requires some ritual kinds of things that need to happen. And so the important thing is getting that accommodation. Now, we did get that to happen at the university because they were accommodating people of the Jewish faith. Recognize they had a different religion than the other Christianity kind of thing. So now the administration has put out a letter asking for the faculty and others to acknowledge that Native students need to be gone from these and to please consider giving them an excused absence. So the other thing is stereotypes are cultural misunderstandings. Here's the biggie. These people just do not understand who we are. They need to learn about Native Americans. They need to learn that we do have differences. And that's where, in the literature, talk about ontology of difference. Critical theorists like Joe Kitchino, Peter McLaren, Henry Giroux, there's others that are doing this kind of research. But critical theory is I bring those up because, and they were all proteges to this Paulo Freire that I'm talking about down in Brazil. But because some of it's Marxist, people kind of reject that. And critical theory is involved. But I use it. But people don't talk about it. Capitalism still uses critical. Uses some of the socialist kinds of things. So I just kind of pet peeve when I have to do that. I'm sorry. I kind of so there's cultural stereotypes, and that's a biggie. I mean. You know, we talk about the mascot issue, and even for some Native people, because of colonization too, and oppression, is that even some Native people kind of think the mascots are okay. But the redskin thing, and I'm going to bring this up because it's argued, and my position is that, you know, my tribe fought over it, and still fighting over it. It says, the comment is, why don't you, we need to deal with the bigger issues. We need jobs, we need all these other things, and you want to talk about this mascot. Well, not me, but others. But again, it is the big issue. What's holding us back is some of these effects of racism, effects of oppression, effects of colonization. And again, some of those are structural that it's just kind of okay. We've lived it so long. Well, why are you bringing it up now as a Native person? Why didn't you bring this up? In fact, that's why the people lost the court case. Because why are you natives talking about it now? Why didn't you talk about it when it came out? Well, it had to be safe to do that. And also it had to be safe for us, but we also had to raise our consciousness, our own consciousness of our own people. Because sometimes there's this thing called internalized oppression where we become the oppressors ourselves. And that's a complex issue. And that's something that Native people are working on. And that's what this is about, folks, as I told you in the beginning. This is about raising your consciousness. This is about learning. I'm not telling you one way or the other that you need to be decolonized or you need to take a stance on that mascot, but it's something you need to become aware of, you need to learn. It's about learning, and hopefully you can make better choices to make the world better for all of us. But they're concerned about that. And we come from a non-privileged part of society. I told one of the stories today of one of our students down in Navajo country. I have one student who they still don't have electricity out there in some places. He had a hard time with computers. Yes, he went to school with computers, busting there, but didn't have access on everyday use. The first one in his family, they didn't understand education at all. They decided literally dropped him off at the institution. And so there's, that's an extreme case, but those of us in society don't realize that, that there's a lot of disparities out there in income and the conveniences that we have, even electricity. Okay, this is the biggie, social transition. Native student challenges include cultural shock, homesickness, unfamiliarity with diverse cultures, and academic demands. So this is what students experience when they come to college. It's a different place. A sense of alienation, a sense of racism, stereotyping, and that value conflict. Learning to cope with key issues. And so we have a theorist, a person named Havre, so there's theory and practice now behind this, and it has to do with this issue. In this study, all these other things that I'm telling you are reaffirmed in other studies. In fact, some of them were done here in Montana. Havre and DeSales done a study with the tribal colleges. White Feather lady done one of the Dakotas with the tribal colleges. So the literature backs up what we're talking about here too. Because when you code the data, it's also based on the fact that we as researchers know sometimes what may be some significant issues. And even though this was a small discussion in the focus groups, and particularly with one group, it's probably the most significant issue out of this whole study. Now they call it living in two worlds, and in academics, those of us say, well, there's no such thing as two worlds, living here and now. But they had to conceptualized it that way. That was important for us as researchers not to tell them that's not right. We needed to listen to them, and we need to record. But it is a feeling of dissonance. That, I'm Native American, but I'm here in this place, and it's uncomfortable. Things just aren't right. I'm not sure what it's about. And it makes it difficult for even students to try to communicate what that's about, because they're not sure themselves. Don't know how to name it. But learning to cope with others, knowing others have survived and change in attitude is possible. So what they said was, even though I feel this way, I've been able to get by because I know that in our tribe is resiliency, and again, other students have been here, they've made it, and that I can change. Let me look at the next one. So some of the things that help them is initiating new friendships, learning about other cultures, developing assertiveness. This is an interesting finding. They liked a certain place, and this talks about the environment being important, but there's a place on campus they call the Duck Pond, and it's kind of serene and that kind of thing. Students just like to go there, a place to be, And there's a whole body of literature on the importance of place in Native American culture. But again, they're saying cultural awareness needed for both non-Native and some Native American students. Now let's remember that for us to understand it, we have traditional students over here, those who practice and live their culture, and on the other side, and if you want to look at it as a round continuum, you can do it that way too, is that on that there's whole different, some students may be more traditional, some may be more acculturated, if you wanted to call it that. Sometimes we have urban Indians already know how kind of things work, so there's a whole array of students here, and some students know their culture and practice it, and some don't. And we need to remember that forced civilization, Christianization, kids were taken away from their families, put in boarding school, mission school. Both of my parents were. My mother was an infant when was put in a Catholic mission, and they both went to boarding schools. So the key time in your life when you learn about your values and your language and your culture and your ways are taken from you. And so those are some of the effects of oppression and colonization, that not only do we have to learn about that, painful things that happen, even genocide, and academicians will argue on genocide, but it doesn't really genocide. It's still here, they kill all of you, so you can't call it genocide, but it is, but there's cultural genocide too. And so another part of this thing is we need to heal ourselves from those things that happen, and the process is becoming aware. I write about the Marias up here with the Army massacre. Tragic stories, and those are all over, and they're really hard to write about. But the other part is learning how to do this kind of research, and that many times these kind of things won't be published. When I try to publish some of the things that I've written from the Native perspective, it's rejected, like that massacre. I used some depositions that I found from descendants of survivors of that massacre, and I wrote about it. The American Journal of Research, and I can't remember exactly the title, but they rejected it, and they said that, well, you're biased. Why don't you put some of the Army perspective in there? Well, the Army has their parts. I mean, they got medals for killing kids and old people, tragic stuff. Hard to talk about. And even we don't talk about it because it's too difficult. And the interesting thing, as I was telling Erica, is that, as a professor, when we have to get publications in that, if we're on a tenure kind of track, one of the readers said that I should go talk to this person. He named that person. That person got his information from me. Now, it's true that I've written non-natives, and they got their information from me. So it was a challenge, folks. So this stuff isn't easy, and that. But let me go back to. I want to talk a little bit about this living in two worlds, because we found this in the study, and this is in the literature, and I don't talk a lot about it here. There's some theory and studies by a guy named Huffman, who has looked at this, and he has a book on it now. When we've done this research, I just had some of his writings. One of the biggest findings about that sense of alienation, of not belonging, of discontinuity, that's when students leave, that when they first encounter this. But there are some who stay He used resistance theory, and he come up with this thing called transculturation. Transculturation is a different kind of concept. It's more a concept. It's happening. That traditional students, those who practice their culture, resist being changed. You're not going to turn me into, and I don't mean to be offensive to this, you're not going to turn me into a white man. And I'm going to make it through this damn place, and I'm going to find out how it works, and they do. And sometimes those aren't the students that take advantage of the support services. Some of them do. So some of them are making and just using their cultural strengths. So this is really an interesting kind of phenomenon. So that's the major thing. That's why I bring this up. And transculturation is interesting because it's not what it is it is almost like that too, but it's not bicultural. And it's not like partly assimilated. Is that they live their traditional values, they learn to cope, they learn how to negotiate their way through here. So the important thing for us is to learn how to reinforce that. And there are some other studies that tell us how we do that. So that's probably the most important thing. How are we doing with time? Are we doing okay? Are we keeping you engaged, or do you want to go home? I usually don't lecture a lot. I do in class. Facilitate the learning process. I don't. Paulo Freire says that he calls it banking. That you as students come to this institution of learning, and we professors have the knowledge and you don't. You're empty, so we fill you with the knowledge. Then we give you, we didn't say this other part though. Then what we do is that we then test you, and if you know what I know, then hey, you can make it through here. That's actually an impressive act. Because each of you come into the learning environment of knowledge and come with your own personhood. And so that's what I've learned to be a facilitator of the process. If you're just here to know what I know, then hey, come visit me, I guess. Okay, but you did talk about reasons for dropout. Moving on here is that, and these are fear of losing their heritage. You're going to change it. Excessive social life, partying, more money men, no child care. We talked about this. A lot of Native students are what we call non-traditional. Non-traditional means that their age is above the standard college level. And so many of them are torn between taking care of their family or going to college. And sometimes we in the tribal college learn that right away. That we have to have provisions for child care. When I taught in tribal college, if you need to bring your kids in the classroom, you can do that. But you have to take care of them. I mean, we still have to conduct the class. And that challenging academic courses, preparation, just weren't ready for this. Lack of discipline in developing good study and learning habits. And this is for all students. And responsibilities back home. That's a biggie. Because of family being an important value, that if something's going on back home, if there's problems in the family, I need to be there with grandma, I need to be there with grandpa, I need to be with my family. And so those are the reasons why students leave. They wanted to talk about that. So we brought that in. There's something else I wanted to mention, but student support services, they appreciate the support services. You have some pretty good support services here for Native Americans, but there's a lot of things we have to we'll look at some things about what we can do to try to help the situation. So I started a peer mentor program down there where we actually used a traditional model in our societies, and that was based on also a study by a guy with tribal colleges that was done up here, Ray List. In his study, he went to 4 tribal colleges asking students, where do you go to get information that was related to health, that they went to students who were a bit older and that kind of thing, more experienced. So hey, we'll just massage that system and use our traditional ways. So I started a society, mentors and mentees. And to get into there, we had a rite of passage, we gave them a song, and there are celebrations along the way, and a rite of passage when they're done, and they'll forever be a member of that society. And so there's those kinds of things. There are some criticism of it. Some students would say, well, that won't work. Well, you know, that's what they said for some reasons. But overall, it does work. Some academic week are challenging, but sources of support are acknowledged. That, yeah, there are places to go for help. Students do realize that. Hey, you do have a writing center. If you have a hard time writing, there are student support services. You can go to, yeah, you can go and talk to the professor. It's okay, they can help you. More accommodation by professors for cultural activities. We mentioned student organizations are sort of straight. You have them here. So they acknowledge that. So support services, one of the things they wanted, however, was more customer friendly. And there's 2 sides to that story. It's pretty hard to be a person working in financial aid when you have 100 students lined up and you have to help each one of them within a certain time, and each one of them has a unique case, and you have to tell the same story again. Here's what it's about. So those are the kinds of things we need to look at. They want more collaboration between programs, and somebody mentioned that today, and it's the same thing. They talk about silos, that we working in these institutions, sometimes we don't talk enough with each other. We don't network enough with each other. That's both in academics and support services. Several recommendations: child care, support groups for natives, needs assessment needed, knowledge of culture and tradition, more outreach and recruitment of the tribe. So they know that we need to go out and visit us, find out who we are, and get some support from the tribe. So again, socioeconomic factors. Students struggle financially in college. This is a biggie, and it's even more big now. That most tribes are struggling, or the lower socioeconomic level, higher unemployment, that kind of thing. And there are a few casino tribes, and that's where general population thinks every tribe has all kinds of money because they have casinos, and that's not true. Goals, motivations. Again, one of the goals is just like all of us. We want a better quality of life for ourselves and our family. We want some prosperity. We want to spend some time with our family. I want to develop a profession. But part of the goal, too, is pride in cultural identity, who I am, and the desire to carry that on, our culture, our language, our legacies, peace of mind, contentment. So I want to keep that culture, acknowledgement of Native American accomplishments. And here's what they want to hear. Is they want to, and other studies will say, we want to see more natives as professors, more natives as professional staff. They're just not enough. Even those that are there, they want to hear about what they do. And now there are a lot of native, well, there's some native professors and that, but we need to tell their story too, so that students will know that it is possible. Preparation, They knew that. If you live in an economically distressed area, you don't get the best kind of school in your community, and this is just not Native Americans. If you're in an inner city with low income, probably not going to have the same quality of things that you would get in the other schools. So they're aware of that. Role models, important to students, and themselves being a role model. They want to be a role model. I want to go home and show that we can do this. Family members, they set examples. And it's even a higher aspiration for some first generation, because I'm the first one. And sometimes that becomes almost a burden. Okay, conclusion. What do we know about this? Family, community, culture, a source of strength. Tribal elders, a model source of strength. Spirituality and ceremony is really important. Important thing. And, customer friendly, I know that this comes from the findings, pretty obvious. Adequate financial support, that's a biggie for all of us now. This thing of cost of college going up and raising tuition is happening around the country. This loan thing is outrageous. I have one daughter who decided to go for a master's film school in New York City, and she took on some really burdensome loans for that a long time. Okay. Returning to the community, cultural support is valued. They want to go back home. So what do we recommend? Read further studies. And I did leave, I used to direct the American Indian program, which is the student part of the program, as well as being on faculty and teaching on the course. In 2007, I went back to faculty, full-time teaching. But in the program, one of the people was kind of upset because, and naturally, if someone tells you, well, sometimes you're just not very customer friendly. So what this one person was adamant that you need to ask us as a service provider about it. Well, I didn't have time to teach him about research. Take the course. I'm doing it inside. I don't know how this fits in. A tombstone for a professor, and it says it's in the syllabus. Okay, somebody gets it. So this social transition needs more study. This idea of cultural shock, identity, value, tradition. So that new thing that I showed you, we need to really understand that more. And once we start to understand that, we can then develop some programs to support that strength. Family, community involvement in the college, and the literature tells us that. Henry Renner and DeSalis, who've done their study down the road here, have that family education model, and it's bringing the family and community into the university. But it's also about outreach going out there. Okay, so we talked about it. It's about people here, so I don't know anything about tribes. How am I supposed to be culturally sensitive? Wow. Remember, they said everyone needs to learn about nations, but it's also going out there. Initiate accommodations for spiritual activities. We covered that. Social initiative, special activities to attract new students. Institute customer support. Keep reading the wrong button. So these things really work. Summer bridge programs. Summer bridge programs make a big difference. That's a norm. And college preparation programs. That's where if you have prep programs where you can offer, some of the English, some of the math courses, that are developmental courses. That's important to a lot of students who never had the opportunity to go to better quality school, that had better teachers and better mechanization to do that. Peer mentoring, recruitment, okay, that's one of our recommendations, that we do that. Let's talk about the strength-based. I know, let me do this. You've been sitting there for a while. I want you to leave. Why don't you just all stand up? Stand up. Let's do this. Okay. Not do, let's use some language. Not do see. This one may be a little more difficult. Sign it back. Itam existigo. Somebody knows that. Exutab. Okay. So you can sit down. But what do you think that means? I actually learned that from our language school. When the little kids taught me that. We have our own language immersion school, like 6th and 8th grade, so they taught me that. So it's hello, okay, natusi. When sun rises, the day opens up, and it's a happy day, and it's coffee is good, huh? And so now you know. Well, I told you another one too when I came in. Sani stapi. Can you say that one? Sani stapi. So when you go to Brownie and you say that, and you say, you're pretty cool. Like, Sani stapi is like, what's happening? What's going on? And we have one of our tribal members back there that can tell you all these school. That isn't what that means. And that's good because we all learn from each other. So, and I'm glad I don't have to be perfect. Oh man, that's a tough journey. Because we're all strangers and we're trying to be perfect, right? Really perfect. Okay, so much for talking on the side. This is significant because we talked about strength-based. And this guy named Anderson that I mentioned, who was the expert in this country in academics. And here's what he said. Rather than delineating the areas where the students like to experience problems or risk factors that may make success difficult, the student strength-based approach is recommended. Rather than focusing on what a student cannot do, emphasizing lack of skills, talents, poor math skills, poor reading skills. Look at the strengths. Emphasize the talents, abilities, strengths. So it just makes sense. It's almost like common sense. Like here's a guy who's the expert in this country, made this paradigm shift. And that's what it is. We have to shift the way we think, the way we look at things. Because we're so busy saying, what's wrong with these Native American students? Huh? They can't be like us. We tried to really make them like us, but they can't do it. Well, I can tell you a whole story about that. I'm reading a book now, and I can't think of the author's name, but it's a history of white people. So, really looking at how this come about, and this is aside from the study, but I just need to share this that. Even with anthropology, it talks about phrenology. At one time, it was believed scientifically that the shape of your head decided your intelligence level. Huh? You finally caught on and realized, well, that's not true. But that was scientific. The other thing is, we're talking about immigration right now, is that there was a point too where there were some writers that wrote that, well, we can't let these Irish people in this country, we can't let those Icanians, because here's the data, and in that book there's a chart, their intelligence level is lower. We don't need those people here. And so this goes back to the early 1900s, some of it's 1800s. So it's sort of how this comes about. So when we look at it, that you know, some of those things kind of get internalized in us, and we don't realize that. And the reason I say that is because it's internalized in us that because these people are primitive, they're less intelligent, they struggle, that's probably why, and so we just need to get away from that. Huh? Let's look at people's strengths. The story I told today is, you know, I'm born and raised on a ranch, farm, up on the reservation. Learned how to train horses. Learned a lot of things from a non-Indian, an old cowboy, trailer cowboy from Wyoming. Still around when I was young. He let me train the colts, and the story I tell is that I was trying to teach one colt to do the groundwork and to hold up their feet, huh? I told him, hey, I'm trying to get this colt, he just fights me, I can't get him, I just can't get him to hold his foot up. It's a fight, it's a struggle. Can't do it. He said, well, hey, you're going to realize that you're not going to make that horse do what he doesn't want to do. You need to focus on the rest of you to do the other things. Because if you focus on that negative thing, he's going to fight and you're going to want him to change. And so that's what strength base is about. It's about working with those other things. It turned out to be a fine goal. So here's an expert that makes that shift. Okay, let me give you quickly some things that we can do. So this Lumina done a study, and actually the study was sponsored by Bill Gates. And so we want to talk about best practices. These are some of the things we recommend. Improve the capacity of minority serving institutions, MSI. Analyze data. So things are data driven. I just showed you a study. It's qualitative. We do have data. There's in the literature. So this is part of the data. Create a collective voice for policy advocacy, strengthen policy and practice, increase commitment to transparency, effectiveness of student learning outcomes, increase the post-secondary completion, traditionally underserved. Well, those are things that we kind of hear all the time in a sense, but let's look at what they said we need to do. So preparation and access. Colleges need to help students prepare for the rigors of college. So if you don't get it in high school or secondary system, colleges need to do some kind of program. We need those developmental courses. They're important. And focus on retention through, we're done. I'm not going home yet. Find new and innovative ways. This last one is really significant. You need leadership in your institution who's going to say these things are important, develop initiatives, and we're going to do it, and your leadership is going to constantly remind us that this is what we're doing, folks. We want to increase diversity. Huh? And that's a lot of stuff in this thing. I'm tired. Well, let's questions, comments. Please, and some things you may disagree with, and that's okay, because this is all about learning. And there may be some things that we don't understand, and some things that may not be clear. But this is just the beginning. It's a raising of consciousness, and making that paradigm shift is really challenging there. Yeah.
So transcultural
transition is not difficult, say like maybe you're an Indian who knows how to negotiate things. Some students whose family went to college may be able to negotiate that. Some people also accept the dominant society values. What she's asking is, where am I in that? I've never heard of that term. So look at the book by Huffman, and he has a couple of papers online. You can read about that. And we have to be careful being categorized. But the reason I bring that up, because this is academic, because there's theory and practice, and studies. And that's what's important, because in academics you can't just get up and say something unless we have that background. Huh? So yeah, where am I on that? And I guess that would be something we could determine ourselves. And yeah, there's criticism of that, because anytime we categorize anything, be careful with generalizations. We're not all like that. I've never seen too many professors like myself who practice ceremony and our traditions. I'm a tribal elder, but I'm also a professor. When I go home, I don't go around saying, call me Dr. Pepion or something. And I like it that way, because that's just Donnie Wednesday. I don't know, he does something down there down south. But I can go dance with the brave dogs and go up to the casino and visit with people. So that's where I'm at. John Murray, our cultural preservation officer, who's my friend, who was going for a doctorate degree and also encountered this stuff, he decided he didn't want to get the doctorate degree because he's a traditionalist and he wanted to practice that, and that was more important. But he did tell me something, and I'm not telling you this to brag on myself, because he says, you have some unique abilities because you can go over there and talk to those folks, but you can also kind of be one of us, huh? So this whole identity thing is confusing, and there's a lot has been written about it. But I really recommend looking at that because, academically, Huffman is not native. But we're already saying that in many kinds of ways. The Four Walls Project that we work with up in Alberta, Canada, is basically the same thing. It's about that balance. It's finding that balance of who we are. As a person, balancing our lives physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's also about learning. It's about cognition. It's about affective learning. But it also has to do with your environment. It affects how you learn. Well, one thing that native have, that's spiritual part. That's something dominant society does not have. So there's a term called, Nitsitapi, or Bikani, Nitsitapi, and this is the indigenous ways of knowing that you learn that the language has a lot of meaning. Nitsitapi is striving to be Bikani, to be the best person I am, to live those values, to go to ceremonies, to pray, to help people. You strive for that. That doesn't mean you're ever going to maybe get there. But it's like life is a journey. Life is a journey. We're all striving towards a better quality of life, being good people. We all want quality of life. Some want more material than others, but that's what it's about in identity. Navajos have this term called Hosho. Most tribes have this kind of thing. And Hosho is walking in beauty, harmony. And this is what's great about teaching indigenous ways of knowing, is that you can take the language and you have these multi-meanings. In fact, there's just no one word. It's maybe a series of words. It's about harmony. It's about peace, Hosho. It's about goodness, that kind of thing. So, and identity is kind of the issue, and that's what this is about. A lot has been written about identity. Where do I stand? Where am I on that circle? Well, something called code switching. It's also done by another person that sometimes I can act like a nappy corn. And sometimes I know. And it can be in the language when you're acting good, you know. Yeah, that's kind of. Huh? Oh, I'm sure, yeah. And there may be even more in the middle. You know, there may be more than a beginning or an end. It's that circle. Maybe a life process. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I gotta read that one. Yeah.
I would say, in that respect, like, don't deny yourself the understanding. When you were referring to women's studies earlier in the othering, I mean, there's so many different things that have come out of that have been moved into our use of critical race theory. And so the fluidity of being and who we are, I mean, that's part of, I see it, especially within my traditional cultures, that, you know, that fluidity, that change, that we're always moving to these different stages of our lives. And so it doesn't, you know, you're not one thing, you're so many different things. And so to understand the fluidity of yourself is really important. But I think that, you know, you said you teach grad students about critical race theory. I started my critical race theory studies when I was an undergrad. And I think that helps Native students move forward because we teach enough sometimes just to get them angry. And so people that are in that sort of resistance position, they don't move forward. You know, if they get stuck there and then they say, well, I'm going to put my foot down, I'm not going to move towards transculturation, then they walk away with enough to be angry and then they stop. And so I think that trying to approach critical race theory as early in our education, especially in Native studies,
Yeah, I do teach out in undergraduate.
is really important to helping propel us forward as, you know, as Native students and as people understand where we lie in trying to learn critical race theory. You know, so that was.
And it's a challenge. Conceptualizing something, you know, what does that mean? And that's good. You need to ask those questions. That's what's important. Ask the question and learn what is that concept about. And it's something you're free to take or leave. But I like Popeye. I am what I am. Some of my academic friends like saying those kind of things. Yeah, back here.
I wondered with the findings from your research, these were current students that were in the focus groups,
Yeah.
right? Like do any of the findings shift if you were to do focus groups or the research that might look at graduates as they reflect back on what would have helped or what did? Does anything shift?
That's why looking at the literature, most of that, except for the one I showed you, is already validated. It's already there. So it isn't something that, in some ways, you already kind of do that from other studies. And that's okay, because it validates things. And so you do teach, I do teach participatory research, and there are different meanings for validity, reliability, and that kind of thing. And yes, that's the argument of qualitative, and then that's the argument, you know, well, you can't generalize that's a picture of a situation. But if it's done over and over again, then it does, we know that, hey, there's something to that, that has some reliability, done over and over again. Good question, yeah. Don't be afraid to ask questions, don't be afraid to challenge things, that's what this is about. The student, and you know, we have this value of respect, and we have this value of not being assertive in most tribes. But when I was learning ceremony, one of my elders told me, and she was on the Canadian side, can't think of the publication, but you do need to ask questions, even in the traditional way, because if you don't ask questions, how are you going to learn? ceremony, but you ask questions in a different way than the other society. You do it in a very respectful way. And you listen. And you learn the protocols, the taboos about what you can talk about and what you can't. So, okay, this is good. You guys are good. I'm really happy that you're here. And you're really a good audience. You're attentive and listening. That helped me a lot. I appreciate that. We have one of our tribal people, John Trudeau. I like to tell these little stories along the way. John Trudeau was an activist during the 70s. He was involved in the American Indian movement and that. They invited him down to New Mexico State to give a talk a few years back. Everybody thought, he's going to talk about activism. He's going to talk about pain. He's going to talk about that. It's about when they occupied Alcatraz. Guess what, folks? He got up and said, it's all about energy. And it's all about positive energy. And having positive energy means the things that you say, the things that you do, the thoughts that you have, it all sends out energy. And if you send out negative energy, you're going to get negative back. He's a pretty cool guy, I thought. Wow. Because everything is alive, and we ask you to have energy. And we're just starting to understand that energy. Now we know it comes from the cosmos. And then natives knew about the cosmos. What else? So, I don't have a collection box, but if somebody has a hat and wants to go around and ask money to go back to Browning, I'm just kidding. They're really treating me well down here. I feel, and the reason I brought the energy is I feel some good energy. And any time you're open to possibilities, that's good. And it may be a resistor in your own way. I don't believe that stuff. Well, question it. Look at it. Examine it. And that's what you're about as students. You're here to learn. This is all about learning. You're going to find it in different ways. This is a dynamic world. Culture changes. Things are really happening. And they're happening very fast. There's already a robot that looks like a human being. She's a good-looking person. And is talking like she has feelings, and I don't believe everything on Facebook again. But and technology is just it's there. I have a smartphone. I have an iPad. I teach online. My car told me on the way over. It's not my car. I rented it. Icy spots. Watch for icy spots. And so, So you're all special people, and you're going to make a difference in this world for yourself. And thank you for allowing me to be here, and I appreciate it. It's not a selfie, but I took your picture. Is that okay? Can I put it on Facebook? Okay.
All right.
So again, let's thank this wonderful person here. You have a great program, great person who's just putting a lot more into this than just a 9-to-5 job that probably even pay. I see what's going on, and we have some good people here. And I know about your family too. You serve some family for you. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave with this so that you have a good journey. Okay? I'm not going to use the microphone. Great God Society. Not too. Kind of a police society. I don't sing power songs. I sing ceremonial songs. So if you're going to expect high singing, hey.
Okay, yeah, mine is a bad.
She's the same, don't let her tell you.
Yeah, I apologize. But you should have done what somebody did to each other, sign cancer.
I'm not perverted.
So I give you good luck with that song and good journey. That was given to me by Morris Middle, North Big Hammer, up on the Canadian side. Thank you.